by referring to coloured players. As someone who loves the English language, part of my objection to what's happening is aesthetic. Look at this, part of the joint statements put out this week by our broadcasters. This one, it was from ITV's Group Director of Diversity and Inclusion, quote, "We will use the findings to build on our internal race fluency training." Race fluency training. I've got no idea what he's talking about, but that's exactly how this is meant to be. You're not meant to know what he's talking about. The Soviet communists called these people the nomenklatura, the self-selecting elite who use language to bamboozle and keep in line those outside of the magic circle. By creating this bizarre semantic cartel, Britain's broadcasters have once again shown that for all their talk of diversity, they're only really interested in looking at things in the same way. That's the Brazier angle. Well, joining me now, Martin Campbell, former Ofcom Chief Advisor. Martin Campbell, really appreciate you joining us this evening. Thanks for your time. Do you think
You're welcome.
that by acting in concert like this, the broadcasters are demonstrating something about the way they think?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I must congratulate Lenny Henry, really, on bringing journalists together to agree anything, because I didn't think it would be possible to do that unless it involved expenses. And this one apparently doesn't. But I think what you were saying about the SNP and the whole sort of weird woke stuff is slightly separate to this, to the Lenny Henry thing. And while I understand that there's a worry about bowing to celebrity and so on, I think what Lenny Henry is saying is right, insofar as these labels, and you hark back to your days as a cub journalist, and I went through them as well. And things like BAME for journalists, it's lazy journalism, and lazy journalism will always finish as dangerous journalism. So from that point of view, I think he's right with BAME. With alcoholic and junkie and the rest of this nonsense, I think that's entirely separate. I was interested in.
Martin, I may be guilty of conflating. I may be guilty of conflating a little bit there, but I just wonder. I mean, you say it's terrific that Lenny Henry. I mean, Lenny Henry, national treasure, adored by millions, etc., etc. But really, the idea that he can say, however helpful his advice may be, that he can essentially tell hundreds of journalists about the language they ought to be using to describe the world around them. I'm not saying he's wrong. I happen to think he's right. I think BAME is really unhelpful, and there are more specific ways of doing it. But the fact that we should all then fall into line, not because journalists have decided that, by the way, but because their bosses have, that strikes me as wrong.
Yes, maybe, but I mean, in a way, journalism is behind the curve on this. The music industry over a year ago came to the conclusion that BAME actually didn't mean anything to a lot of people. To a lot of people, it was pretty insulting. And what is it? If you're not white, are you BAME? Then, in which case it becomes a completely meaningless label. So, I mean, I think for him to point out the dangers of just labeling, and that's why I do think that journalists should never have taken this up in the first place. I personally feel that so much journalism, with GB News the exception, has gone along with this to a degree that is worrying. And so to suddenly turn around and say, actually, what we're doing here is a little bit weird and we shouldn't do it. So I actually think, and actually it's good for journalism to have a think about this. The fact that it's Lenny Henry, well, who cares?
Yeah. Well, I just go back to my original question, really, Martin. I mean, where's the pluralism of the thing? It's for all the terrestrial broadcasters simultaneously to say, Lenny, we agree with you. You're right. BAME's not the right acronym to use. It's the acting in concert from organisations which deify the principle of diversity, and actually then, when it comes to it, act as one. Where's the pluralism there? Where's the cognitive diversity? Where's the freedom of thought?
Well, my worry about particularly with BBC journalists of the obsession with diversity actually makes any question of diversity diluted because of the way that they approach it. So I don't see anything wrong with having a look at the way that that diversity it is presented. And as a journalist, I do feel that it's lazy just to label people this and that. It's the same. I mean, political journalists have done it for years. Now, I always think it's right. Oh, he's a left-wing politician. He's a right-wing politician. Therefore, they obviously don't agree on anything. And if you've got two right-wing politicians, they clearly agree on everything. It's complete nonsense. So the further that they get away from labels, the better. My bigger worry is what you're talking about in Scotland, where actually you're not saying what is going on. You're not stating the fact. You're not saying this is the state of affairs. You're using weasel words. We hear a lot of weasel words lately, don't we? But you're using weasel words to describe things, and that's not good.
Yeah, Martin, you're right to say that what's happening there under the SNP is of a different category altogether, and perhaps it's something we'll get to debate on another occasion. Martin Campbell, really appreciate your time this evening. Thanks a lot.